I recently read an article out of Foreign Affairs that I kind of wanted to touch on because back in 2018 we had such a great opportunity for diplomacy with North Korea, and then it just all went to pot. And this kind of goes into why, and with the election of the new South Korean president, that there may be an opportunity now to reinitiate. South Korea's new president could transform the Korean Peninsula. How Lee Jae-myung could push Trump and Kim back to real diplomacy. And in this article, it talks about how the new South Korean president has already said publicly that he isn't going to be as hawkish or belligerent towards North Korea, and that negotiations with North Korea must resume. And in this Foreign Affairs article, and the Foreign Affairs is the Bible of the Beltway. This is what the deep state reads. This, the New York Times, and a couple other things. So you can kind of see where the wind is starting to blow. And in the article, it talks about how the reduction of tensions and negotiations with Kim and the new South Korean president could really lead to something special. At the end of this article, it kind of goes into that and how that would be achieved. But also in this article, it does something that you hardly ever see in the Washington Beltway. They criticize the previous administration very, very deeply, and they get into it. A little bit of a backstory here with Kim, Trump, negotiations, the previous administration. The past decade has shown that managing North Korean risk comes down to one underlying factor: political will in Seoul and Washington. Trump is an outlier among U.S. presidents in that he enjoys dealing with the ruling Kim family. Making a deal with North Korea was a signature focus of his first term's foreign policy, and sealing it remains a piece of unfinished business. Trump, in fact, deserves credit for the breakthrough achieved in 2018 Singapore summit, the first ever meeting between the U.S. and North Korean heads of state. His willingness to meet with Kim encouraged the Korean leader to stop testing intercontinental ballistic missiles, partially demolish his nuclear weapons test site, and offer to freeze further development of his nuclear program. The progress Trump set in motion was dependent on equal participation from Seoul. South Korea's president at the time, Moon Jae-in, doggedly pursued a détente with North Korea and teed up each step in negotiations. Over the course of a dizzying 12 months of summitry, which began after Kim accepted Moon's invitation to participate in January 2018 Winter Olympics in Seoul, all three parties, Pyongyang, Seoul, and Washington, appeared ready to fundamentally change their relationship. But this opening soon closed. By the time Trump met Kim for a second summit in Hanoi, Trump's attention had drifted from North Korea, and both men's greed for a quick deal derailed the fragile progress. On the summit's first night, the White House announced that the two leaders were ready to sign a joint agreement the following day. When both sides insisted on maximalist goals, the next morning's talks, however, Trump simply walked out before lunch was served. This was a serious mistake. Had the U.S. president remained and engaged with his North Korean counterpart, he might have been able to persuade Kim to fully shutter the Yongbyon nuclear facility and lock in the moratorium on missile testing. I do agree. That was a mistake to walk out. I understand the negotiation tactic involved there, but it does appear that that was a lost opportunity. Instead, by 2020, diplomacy had broken down ostensibly in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. North Korea imposed the harshest lockdowns on the planet. Even its diplomats were sealed off from foreign contact. Weeks ahead of U.S. President Joe Biden's inauguration, Kim laid out a 5-year plan for North Korea's military modernization. A year later, one of the first pandemic-related restrictions Kim's loosened was to allow missile testing. Always a 5-year plan, isn't it? It's always a 5-year plan with these guys. He unveiled one military innovation after another: a nuclear submarine, a guided missile frigate, military reconnaissance satellites, attack drones. Ankit Panda, a nuclear policy analyst with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, recently described Kim's efforts to expand his country's nuclear capabilities as breathtaking. I think that's a fair statement. It has been breathtaking. The missile development, they just launched a new destroyer that, the way it looks, has vertical launch systems for intercontinental ballistic missiles. One of the first surface destroyers we've seen with that. It didn't help when South Koreans narrowly elected Yoon to the presidency in March 2022. He pursued a hardline approach towards Pyongyang. Yoon's tough guy stance only reinforced Biden's disdain for talking to Kim. For the first time since the end of the Cold War, a U.S. presidential term came and went without a single meeting between U.S. and North Korean officials. Not one meeting. That's incredible. To be sure, Biden officials made other kinds of progress in Asia, strengthening the United States Indo-Pacific alliances and facilitating trilateral security cooperation with Japan and South Korea. But they left the North Korean security problem worse than they found it. Thanks in part to Washington's inattention on Biden's watch, Kim embarked on a profound strategic reorientation towards Russia. In April 2019, after the aborted Hanoi summit, Kim visited Vladivostok to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. When Kim returned to Russia in September 2023, he sealed an alliance between the countries by opening a spigot of ammunition transfers to Russia for its war in Ukraine. Putin reciprocated with a historic visit to Pyongyang the following summer, and the two leaders signed a major defense treaty. On the basis of that treaty alliance, Putin has been supplying food, fuel, and advanced weaponry to Kim. Meanwhile, starting in the fall of 2024, North Korea sent to Russia the most precious resource in any alliance: troops. By the time Biden left the White House, over 10,000 North Korean fighters had been deployed to the Russian front. By providing such aid, North Korea collapsed the divide between East Asian and European theaters in a way not seen since World War II. And 10,000 Korean troops have been fighting the Ukrainians. So much so that on the Victory Day parade, we had President Putin hugging North Korean officers. This is on Victory Day this year. He's thanking and hugging North Korean officers for their troops' service in the fight against Ukraine. Now, I know the current administration says this would never happen if he was in charge, and that very well may be the case. But what is sure, as that this did happen on the last administration's watch, and the breakdown of relations in negotiations, in communications, and even sending carrier pigeons between the two is completely gone. And the opportunity to have negotiations again with North Korea is enticing because we do need to break them away from this alliance. And their interests are better served with a good relationship with South Korea. After all, they are all Koreans. We're going to get to the end of this article. Finally, Lee will have to shift his language around reunification. Early last year, in a stunning policy reversal, Kim recognized South Korea as a sovereign state and challenged Seoul to agree on a national border. In doing so, he tossed out his country's and his family's long-standing precept that North Korea and South Korea must be unified. That put the ball in Lee's court. I'm very curious to what the response is in the halls of Washington. What if South and North Korea were to agree on a border and thus essentially end the Korean War, which is not over? It's only an armistice. they are still technically at war. Unlike Kim, Lee lacks the authority to unilaterally change his country's policy. The South Korean Constitution defines the Republic of Korea as encompassing the entire Korean Peninsula and its adjacent islands, and stipulates that the country pursue a policy of peaceful unification based on the basic, free, and democratic order. But South Koreans' views on reunification are evolving. According to polling last year by the Korean Institute for National Unification, less than half of South Korean millennials see reunification as necessary. At a minimum, Lee should articulate a new vision, the peaceful coexistence of two sovereign states, and nudge the South Korean public towards a more realistic and constructive approach. Paradoxically, by letting go of the dream of reunification, South Koreans would likely increase the actual contact they have with North Koreans and facilitate reunions between the dwindling numbers of relatives directly divided by the Korean War. If Seoul moves away from its insistence on reunification, Pyongyang will very likely be more open to contact at people-to-people level. None of this will be easy, but Lee can provide the consistent focus on North Korea that Trump lacks. If Lee can foreclose the unrealistic prospect of reunification, stop insisting on North Korea's complete denuclearization, and offer Kim a path towards healthy economic development, he'll open room for a détente. That would make it possible to put in place a wide variety of policies that would reduce tensions on the Korean Peninsula. And if Lee succeeds, the U.S.-South Korean alliance can itself undergo a necessary transformation into a partnership based on fostering peace rather than preparing for war. I love this piece. I think this piece is very insightful, and I agree with it. I think that the new president of South Korea does offer an opportunity for negotiations and communication, and that the Trump administration should take advantage of that. Speaking in peace is always better than war. We have a belligerent power in North Korea that has been neglected, as you heard in this article, in this piece right here, neglected. And for one of the first times you hear from the Washington Beltway, phrases such as, thanks in part to the inattention on Biden's watch. Things like that. We have a potential here. I hope the Trump administration grabs it. He's done it before. He can do it again. And frankly, I think that only Trump can make this happen again. It's been a complete failure, our Korean policy, since the president walked out of that dinner, that lunch in Hanoi, until now. It can be changed. It can do a complete 180. All we have to do is be willing to take the opportunity. I hope you liked the video. If you did, hit the like. Hopefully you'll subscribe, share with a friend, let them know that we have an opportunity in South Korea. With a president that isn't so hawkish, and a president of the United States who's always willing to make a deal, maybe it's time we talk to North Korea again. Thank you. I appreciate you.